Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast. My name is Maher Mizahi. I'm your host, and we are no longer in Cote d'Ivoire. We are no longer at the African Cup of Nations. We're back in Algiers, but we're going to do one final episode, sort of recapping the fallout of the African Cup of Nations for all 24 teams. My name is Maher Mizahi. I'm not sure if I've already said that or not. Thank you for tuning in. And without further ado, let's go through each of the 24 teams. Let's see if they made coaching changes or not. And let's see what's on the horizon for all of them. I'm going to try to limit it to 1 to 4 minutes for each of them. That way we don't have too long of a show. So before we start, I just want to hopefully say that we're going to limit this to 34 to 40 minutes, something like that. Okay, here goes. So the main question in Morocco is what is going to happen with Walid Regragui? Um, we know the answer now. That was the question after the African Cup of Nations. We know that he's going to stay with the Moroccan national team, and it might be a shock to some to think, how could they fire their coach after being eliminated in the knockout stages of the African Cup of Nations after he took them to the semifinals of the World Cup? And what I would say is that after listening to a lot of very intelligent Moroccan journalists speak about Walid Regragui, there are real concerns on if he's too stubborn. Regragui went in with a 4-1-4-1, and that worked really good at the World Cup when he was playing out of possession. But at the African Cup of Nations, what we saw was when his team got into some trouble, for example, when Hakim Ziyech was injured and they couldn't rely on his magical left foot and free kicks or set pieces, or to play cutting through balls in behind the defenders, there was never really a plan B. He never changed his formation. um, yeah, there wasn't any real way that they could shift gears into a third or fourth or fifth gear, and offer something different. And the good thing about Regreg is that he took responsibility, and he said, yeah, it's my fault. And now the question is he going to be able to accurately self-assess himself and do it in time for the 2025 African Cup of Nations, which is just, again, about 13 or 14 months away. And this is the one for Morocco that they cannot really, it's not that they can't lose it, it's that this is the golden opportunity. They haven't won an African Cup of Nations since 1976. Now it's at home. No more excuses. You have a good team with a good coach. They almost have to get this one, right? So you can feel the pressure sort of mounting on the Atlas Lions and on their coach. But I think he has, a great young talented generation of players coming in who, in 1 year's time might be entering the peak of their powers. So now it's up to him really he has the ingredients. Time for him to come up with the recipe, and not just one recipe. He needs to come up with an entree, a main dish, dessert, coffee, everything. Let's leave Morocco aside and let's go to Tunisia. Tunisia are a complete mess, unfortunately. The federation president Wadi Al Jari is still in jail. He's still awaiting his judgment. There's an open war between him and his clan of administrators and the Ministry of Sport in Tunisia. The elections for the new federation are supposed to take place on March 9th, but to this date, there is no candidates. And so we don't know what's going to happen after March 9th. I think there's going to have to be like some kind of extraordinary summit or something. It's very, very complicated, but basically the federation is going to be completely frozen for a while. Tunisia as a country doesn't really have much infrastructure in terms of stadiums or academies. They don't have a lot of cash to pay great coaches. They were paying the previous coach, Al Qadri, just $15,000 a month. And he resigned after, the poor showing at the African Cup of Nations. So it's not looking good for them. The only two real names that have come up as perhaps successors to Jalal Qadri are Corentin Martins and Uber Veloud. Two names that are, seen as viable coaches on the African continent. They do have experience, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, coaching a few different clubs on the continent. But they're definitely, class B or a class C in terms of how they're viewed or how they're considered. on the African continent. They're not, they're not a Carlos Queiroz, for example, who's seen as a little bit of a better option, or Hugo Bruce or Hervé Renard. You know, they're seen as a step under. Neither of them, for example, has ever coached, I think a World Cup team, if I'm not mistaken. Let's leave Tunisia aside, but they need to get their affairs in order. Another federation that needs to get its affairs in order is Algeria. So this is a crazy story, but after Algeria was eliminated at the 2023 African Cup of Nations in Cote d'Ivoire, the federation president goes to Jamal Belmadi and says, "Look, we've been eliminated from two African Cup of Nations consecutively in the group stages, despite the fact that 16 teams out of 24 get to the next stage. We didn't qualify to the 2022 World Cup. I think we both agree that it's time to move on." And the coach, Jamal Belmadi, pretty much said, "Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. It's time to move on. We can go our separate ways." What Jamal Belmadi wanted was to go back to Algiers and have a press conference and explain, why he failed and how he failed, and answer questions, in front of the press, and go out on his own terms. But what ended up happening was that the federation president, Walid Sadi, puts a tweet out saying, Jamal Belmadi and I have come to an agreement and he's leaving. And Belmadi was pissed. So when they get back to Algiers, the rest of his staff, they sign for 2 months of salary. But Jamal Belmadi doesn't sign his resignation. And what you have to understand is that in Jamal Belmadi's contract, which runs until 2026, there are no objectives in his clause. It's not like they put, you have to reach the semifinal of the African Cup of Nations, otherwise we can fire you. There are no objectives in his clause. So he can stay technically until 2026. He can go to FIFA, and FIFA is going to give him, the 4 or 5 million euros that are still owed to him. And so as of now, Jamal Belmadi, he left Algeria. He still hasn't signed his resignation, but Algeria have said that they're going to continue and pursue another coach. There have been 2 or 3 coaches on the list, Carlos Queiroz, Vahid Halilodzic, and Vladimir Petkovic. Those are the ones that the Algerian Federation seemed most interested in. Carlos Queiroz kind of came to an agreement with the federation, but then didn't agree on the finer details and politely declined. Vahid Halilodzic, I believe, some people believe that it's actually Algeria that declined, maybe because of how he left last time. And finally, Vladimir Petkovic is not really seen as, I think neither side really agreed. And now apparently Algeria are targeting Jose Peseiro from Nigeria. And they want to make an offer, and Peseiro is considering if he wants to extend his contract with the Nigerian Football Federation or the Algerian Football Federation. So we'll see how that goes. But once Algeria gets their coach in, they need to find a way to get the other coach to resign, amicably, hopefully. And then this new coach has, a lot to do with so many things coming up. Egypt. Okay, Algeria are a mess. Tunisia are in a bigger mess. Egypt, it feels like, are in... it's crazy. So Egypt came, and after the Afcon, they hired Hussam Hassan, one of their greatest strikers ever in Egyptian football history, probably the greatest striker in Egyptian football history, and Ibrahim Hassan, the greatest right back in Egyptian history. And they're twins, Hussam and Ibrahim Hassan, if you don't know them. They're twins, they're coaches, but what you have to know is that they've never really been considered, a world-class tactician or a great coach. What the twins are known for is insulting, being fiery, being tough, being passionate, not really, their footballing acumen. And a lot of people think that the reason why this appointment was made was an economic one. The twins, actually, Hussam Hassan's salary is going to be 15 or 16,000 euros, which is, I believe I read online was a little, I think it's 10%. No, a little less than 10% maybe of what Rui Vitoria was being paid. And what you don't know is the Egyptian economy is really, really not in a good place at all. I had a friend that I was talking to 2 days ago. He told me the price of cooking oil increased by 200% in 2 weeks. At the African Cup of Nations, we only saw 4 or 5 Egyptian journalists at the African Cup of Nations, which is crazy. Usually there's at least 60 or 70. And when we asked why, they said because media outlets don't really have money at the moment. So the Egyptian Federation, but Egypt as a country is not in a good place at the moment. They make this appointment, and I think we're entering the Egyptian banter era because Hussam Hassan, as a player, one time they went to go play a friendly in Lebanon, and there was like a skirmish, and there was a military man on the side of the pitch who runs on with his rifle. Hussam Hassan wanted to grab the rifle and shoot somebody. He's that crazy. One time, a photographer took a photo of him that was unflattering. He ran after the photographer, grabbed his camera, smashed it on the floor, kicked the photographer when he was on the ground. Um, this is the kind of coach that we should be getting. The press conferences should be very entertaining. Might be beefing with other coaches, and the brothers, they're both the same. They have the same mentality. They look the same. They're identical twins. They even apparently got married on the same day at the same wedding. So not to the same woman, thankfully. But this is what we're getting in Egyptian football. So it should be very entertaining. I don't think it's probably a recipe for success, but we'll see how it goes. Mauritania. Mauritania only got one win from four matches at the Afcon, but it was the most important win in national team history. As a result, Emir Abdou and his team, when they return to Mauritania, they're greeted as heroes. And Emir Abdou and I think his agent, they do a really good job of saying, he's in demand and Algeria wants to hire him, which was, rubbish. And if you look at Emir Abdou and who he's being linked with, he was linked with maybe 4 or 5 national teams. But he ends up extending his contract to $35,000 per week, which is absolutely huge for Mauritania. That's a lot of money. And Ahmed Yahya is a president at the Mauritanian Federation that has money. But I just wonder if it's justified after having one win of the 4 matches. They do have a lot of work to do in FIFA World Cup qualifying. They lost DR Congo and they tied South Sudan, which is not a good result at all. So I think it's good to have continuity. I probably wouldn't have paid Emir Abdou $35,000 a month, but it's good for them to have continuity. But I just wonder, what more can he do with this squad of players? Maybe he can get out of the group again in Morocco? I'm pretty sure, I'll bet my house that they can't qualify to the World Cup. So is it worth the wages? If I was Federation President, I wouldn't have done it, but again, continuity should see them get better. Burkina Faso fired Hubert Veloud. I think it was the most underwhelming Afcon for Burkina Faso in a very, very long time. The names that are being mentioned to replace him are Kamou Malo, who, again, I think he's a police officer, father of Patrick Malo, who's a right back for Burkina Faso. And he was the coach of Burkina Faso at the previous African Cup of Nations before in Cameroon. The other name that's being apparently thrown around is Aristide Banse, the legendary striker for Burkina Faso. But he came out online and said that it's too early for him and that he won't be taking that job. Whoever it is, I think they're going to have to find a striker because Burkina Faso only really scored on penalty kicks at the Afcon. The good news for them is that Shakhtar Donetsk in the Europa League today, Lassina Traore is back. They're a very, very talented striker that struggled with so many debilitating injuries. So having him back is step one. But then also, they're going to have to find a way to integrate their 17, 18-year-old very talented youngsters. They have a striker named Suleiman Aliou, seen as one of the best strikers at his age, signed with Nordsjælland in Denmark. And they also have, Ousmane Kamara, who reminds me of a little bit of Bertrand Traore, more of a creative attacking midfielder. So Burkina Faso need more offensive firepower, and they need a coach to replace Hubert Veloud, but I don't think they have a budget to bring in a world-class coach. Let's talk about Mali. Eric Sekou Chelle, their coach, has 12 wins, 5 draws, and 2 losses. 36 goals for, 12 goals against. The Minister of Sport and the President of the Federation came out and said, we don't know if we're going to extend him or if we're going to keep him or maintain him, but they will. With that kind of record, they will. But the thing with Mali is that they have let's call it the Senegal syndrome, which is when you get to the important part of a tournament, they always seem to fail. And that was Senegal prior to 2021. They didn't win a trophy at any level with any national team. And for Mali to, they always get to the semifinals and crash out. They need to find a way to get over their mental hurdle. And their loss to Cote d'Ivoire was by and large a mental one. But still, I think the coach Chelle looks good. And they have, a few big tests coming up in World Cup qualifying. I just wonder if, getting over that obstacle Is it a coaching thing, or maybe you need a star player like Senegal had with Sadio Mane? That's one thing I keep thinking about, somebody to take the game in their own hands and put it away. Cape Verde come into they're doing really good in FIFA World Cup qualifiers with 4 points. They were, in my opinion, the most impressive side in Cote d'Ivoire in terms of tactically and technically. They also went home with a hero's welcome. The coach Bubista signed, endorsement contracts with a water company. He was honored in municipalities and city halls. So honestly, everything looks good for Cape Verde. I just hope they can continue what they were doing in Cote d'Ivoire. Guinea. Kaba Diawara was highly doubted prior to the tournament. He had, Guinea, I think, exceeded expectations because of how they looked prior to the tournament. But I think their results outweigh their performances. They only really played well for 1.5 matches, in my opinion, which was against, maybe a half against Cameroon, and we'll say against the Gambia, they outplayed them. But I thought they were outplayed by Equatorial Guinea in the round of 16. They were very lucky to beat them, and then they didn't do anything against DR Congo. So for me, Guinea, there's nothing new under Kaba Diawara or anyone else. They still look like a disjointed team, a team of individuals, not really a team that's more than a sum of their parts. And I think they're going to remain that way, even if they continue with Kaba Diawara, he himself has to decide if he wants to continue with Guinea. Cote d'Ivoire, the champions. What do they do with Emers Faye? I don't think you can fire him, obviously, right? I mean, he won you an African Cup of Nations. He doesn't have his coaching badges, though. But still, I think he'll stay on, and maybe he's going to hire, another coach with their coaching badges as an assistant coach. But the good thing about Cote d'Ivoire is that they know their best 11 now. They know that Simon Adingra should be starting on the left. They know that Sebastien Haller is going to be starting as a striker. And then on the right, you can play whoever, Pepe or Gradel. They know who their midfielder is supposed to be. They know Jean-Michel Seri balances that midfield with Kessié and Seko Fofana. I just hope that they can keep this team together, until the World Cup. Because you hear rumors about Seko Fofana maybe wanting to retire, Max-Alain Gradel wanting to retire. And I just wonder, again, can they keep this team together? Serge Aurier as well. If they do, they know their best 11. They can get, an experienced assistant coach in to maybe accompany Emers Faye. Cote d'Ivoire look good. I think they're coming back into that top 5 African teams on the continent at the moment. Guinea-Bissau, Bashiro Kande is gone. What? He's been in the job for 8 years, I believe, since 2016. And prior to that, I think he also had a stint with the national team where he was with them for maybe 9 years. I'm making up numbers, but he's been in total with them for more than 15 years, probably 17, something like that. So for him to be fired is a little bit shocking, but at the same time, 4 consecutive Afcons never make it out of the group stages. So what's next? The Bissau Guinean. The Bissau Guinean media are linking the jobs to Jorge Costa, Portuguese manager, and Abel Xavier, another Portuguese manager who's originally from Mozambique. I don't know if you remember him, the blonde guy with the hair for the Portuguese national team in Euro 2000. So we'll see which direction they go. But they're in a good position in World Cup qualifying. They have 4 points. What I would like to see from Guinea-Bissau now is for them to go on an offensive and pick up, a bunch of talented youngsters that have suddenly emerged in Spain and Portugal. A player like Ansu Fati, it's too late for him. But there are players like Claudio Gomez, players like Amadou Balde at Sporting. Those are young, very talented players under the age of 23 that I would like to see Guinea-Bissau pick up, because they have some good players like the striker Francolino Ju, but I think they're overall an aging generation. So if they can renew, regenerate, and at the same time do it seamlessly and through the World Cup qualifiers, that could be good for them. Senegal, I almost said Leopold Senghor. Augustin Senghor said that for Aliou Cissé, there's no question of the federation or the government getting rid of him. So now, straight on ahead, Afcon 2025 and World Cup 2026. They just need to make sure that he's paid. It came out during the tournament that he hasn't been paid for 6 months. I'm sure he will be paid. But Senegal, yes, they lost to Cote d'Ivoire, the eventual champions, but uh, prior to that, everybody thought they were the most impressive team in the tournament. So um, I think there's not much they should be changing. They should just continue to do what they've been doing. The Gambia, Tom Saintfiet, after 5 years, decides to resign from the Gambian national team. Here's a little bit of a bombshell. After speaking to some Gambian journalists, they told me that nobody's replaced him yet. That I think the job vacancy hasn't even been posted yet. Nobody's thrown their hat in the ring, so to speak. The Gambia were supposed to have preliminary qualifiers for the 2025 Afcon in March, so next month. And some journalists are convinced that the Gambia actually might withdraw from that. Um, I'm not sure if it's due to financial issues or something else, but things are really stagnating and even regressing for the Gambia. So that's a shame. They need to make sure that they get their federation and administrative issues sorted to make sure they can continue to progress. For Ghana, Chris Hughton obviously resigned after they crashed out in the group stages again, like Algeria. Um, so Chris Hughton is done, and there's been a huge campaign by journalists. Hashtag Save Ghana Football. You can look it up on Twitter or X, and you'll see that they actually had protests in front of the Ghanaian Federation. It later came out that the budget for the Ghanaian delegation was more than, I think it was $8 million. I don't know if all of it was used, but that's a huge budget, and all of a sudden stories come out about all these shady people around the team taking money that does not belong to them. And that's it's a shame. It's a shame, but maybe this movement, because it really seems like people are dejected and have completely had enough, and they will not accept the way it's been going for Ghana. Maybe this can be like a sort of defibrillator. It can shock the Ghanaian national team back into form. I think what they need to do, and it looks like they're going to appoint Eto'o as I'm recording this podcast to succeed Chris Hughton. So he's his predecessor and his successor. I think he's going to have to rip the Band-Aid off. No more IU brothers. Iñaki Williams is a great player, but it seems to be a failed experiment. Give us those young, exciting players. Give us an Ibrahim Osman who's going to be at Brighton into 2024. Give us Ernest Nuama. Give us, Mohamed Kudus, Kamaldeen Sulemana. You have the young, exciting talent. Daniel Afriyu, why not? Give them to us. We're sick of the old, stale generation. Give us a new generation. And the same thing, I didn't mention that for Algeria, but same thing for Algeria. Nigeria performed a lot better than I think we all expected at this African Cup of Nations, and the coach Jose Peseiro deserves a lot of credit for that. He changed his formation. He changed a lot of bad habits that the Super Eagles had prior to the tournament. And Peseiro's in demand. I already mentioned that Algeria have made him an offer that he's considering. And Nigeria want to extend him as well. So if he stays with Nigeria, I'm just going to be curious to see, do they persist and do they continue with that compact style of play where they hit teams vertically on the counterattack? Or are they going to go back to this 4-4-2 that he was trying before the tournament that wasn't really working? And are they going to look as organized as they looked during the tournament? Are they going to start looking disorganized as they did prior? I would be shocked if they regress that badly, but that's one thing that we have to ask. Cameroon. Cameroon, the president, Samuel Eto'o fils, apparently handed a letter of resignation saying, I'm going to quit. And then his resignation was rejected, I think, by the board. Like, no, we don't accept it. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, do we look stupid? Like he tried to show that he's going to take accountability, but it's not. He still hasn't fired Rigobert Song. During the tournament, there was a huge investigation that came out from The Athletic investigating his corruption. From when I speak to Cameroonian journalists, they told me that these are all very credible allegations, and that I think sooner rather than later, I think FIFA are going to come down on Samuel Eto'o, which is a shame because obviously an iconic player, the best, in my opinion, the most titled, the most accolades of any African player in history. Very charismatic, respected by everybody. And for him to go out like this, again, it would be such a shame. But I think FIFA is going to come down on him sooner rather than later. So if this happens and Rigobert Song is out too, I think Cameroon are coming to an end of a cycle. So players like Vincent Boubacar, Carl Toko Ekambi, players like, well, Choupo-Moting wasn't even at the last Afcon, but he's going to be gone too. Zambo and Gisa's coming to the end of his prime. Um, yeah, I think we're coming to the sort of end of that cycle of players, and we're going to have to see if Cameroon can produce a new cycle of players. Equatorial Guinea, wow, if you haven't been keeping up with Equatorial Guinea, go look up what's been happening over there. After the tournament, it turns out, well, the federation comes out with a statement saying that they're reshuffling their staff. They're keeping the coach, but they're reshuffling his staff, and that Emilio Nsue and Ivan Idu Salvador, the number 6 with the dyed hair in Cameroon, but he didn't have dyed hair this time around, but very scrappy midfielder. They were both being disciplined. Then some media reports came out that they stole like a safe in the hotel. Other media reports came out that they were doing weird things in public. We didn't really know what to make of it. Emilio Nsue on Thursday evening goes on live on Instagram, and he says he just basically lights the house on fire. Fegifoot, the Equatorial Guinean Federation, they're all corrupt. The federation president is corrupt. They've stolen more than €1 million from us. They owe, I don't know how much money to the hotel in Malibu and the Sofitel, and they put it on the players. They falsified vaccination certificates in Cameroon, just like everything. Basically saying it's us, the players, and he's saying the players are unified behind him, or the federation president. So one or the other. And we'll see what the authorities of the country or what the board of the federation decide. But it's like a drama, like a Spanish soap opera. What's crazy is that, over the last 3 years, Equatorial Guinea have been one of the most impressive sides in Africa, in my opinion. They have 6 points out of 2 matches in World Cup qualifying. They had a great run at the 2021 Afcon in Cameroon. They had a great run at this Afcon in Cote d'Ivoire. So you would think that, if they had that much success, there would be good organization at the federation level. So for this to come out like this, just shows you that sometimes there's no logic to the Afcon. DR Congo, like Equatorial Guinea, in my opinion, and Cape Verde, one of the hottest sides on the continent over the last 18 months. And they stuck with their coach, Sebastian Desabre, who's really largely responsible for turning things around for them. And now really my question is, can they build upon this? They've been to the semifinals before. They've won third place matches before, like in 2015. And then they just fell apart. Nothing ever came of it. And I wonder if they can build on this third place finish. Or they didn't even finish third, right? South Africa did, on this fourth place finish. Yeah, we'll see. Mozambique had a hero's welcome, like Cape Verde, like Mauritania. They didn't even win a game at the Afcon, but they had 2 draws. And Cote d'Ivoire and Ivorians are always thanking Moroccans for their title, and they should, because that Morocco win against Zambia is essentially what sent them into the knockout stages. But if Mozambique doesn't equalize against Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire is probably out too. So you should be thinking Mozambique too. The coach, Chiquinho Conde, is staying on until at least July. That's when his contract runs out. One thing we didn't pick up over in the tournament was that there were actually disagreements within the camp for bonuses and for financial compensation, and that flew under the radar. But what Chiquinho Conde is going to do, and this is really cool, is he's flying to Portugal for 1 month to learn. And this reminds me of when I interviewed Rulani Mokoena from South Africa, and he said he took a 1-year hiatus and just watched football in Europe and just tried to learn and pay attention to everything that was happening. So Chiquinho Conde is going to Portugal for 1 month to learn, and then they're playing some friendly matches in March. I assume if they do well in those, then he's going to stay on the job. They did a good job against Algeria in World Cup qualifiers. But I think they have 3 points. They beat Botswana, I think, who are second. So they're in a decent place. They just need to continue improving as they have been. Tanzania, Hamed Morocco, I think the interim coach, I haven't seen any indication that he's going to go. So he might stay and become the full-time coach. I just don't see any clear direction from the Taifa Stars. You know, their best players over the last 5 years, probably Simon Msuva and Mbwana Samata. They're both aging. Hamid Mao is aging. John Boko, he's not really been in the squad anyways, but he's aging. They have some young defenders, but I just don't know who's going to replace all of these players, especially in attack. That Calvin John, for example, was supposed to be a wonder kid, never really got around to developing the way he was supposed to. Adel Amrouche, the coach, brought in a bunch of young talent, but they were all playing in like, I don't know, second reserve team of Vancouver Whitecaps or in the 5th or 6th division in England. I don't think those are players you can rely on to be the future of the Tanzanian national team. So I just don't know where it's going to come from. And they're hosting the 2027 Afcon, so they need to get it together. As for Zambia, Avram Grant is staying. He said that he gave apparently a really controversial interview at home where he said, I don't see, or he said the transits were too long when they were flying to Cote d'Ivoire. That they stayed 9 hours and that it was very tiresome, traveling to Cote d'Ivoire. And he said, when we saw how Fecafoot prepared, meaning the Cameroonian national team, who they played in a pre-tournament friendly, that's when he realized how bad that Zambia, prepared for the Afcon. And then he later came out and said, no, I never gave this interview, so we don't know what to believe. But he's staying on for the moment. He visited Patsendaka in England. And, after that very successful qualifying campaign, I can understand that. But we'll see if he can continue that success or if it was a fluke. Shout out Zambia too, because Rachel Kunda Nanji sets a world record for a transfer fee for any footballer, any female footballer, African or non-African. So respect, really, really cool. Angola, I don't know if you remember, but initially they said that their coach Pedro Gonçalves was gone. Well, I mean, that's what was coming out of Angola in cyberspace. And now it seems like he's staying, which is, I think, good news because Angola, again, if you look at their squad, they have that young generation of players, Zito Lovumbu, Capita, Zini, Milson. These are like very talented young players. Jelson Dalla is not old necessarily. Mabalulu is not old. I think, that there's something in that group keeping them together. They really, really made people proud at home. So keeping them together and trying to advance with them is the right way. And I think if they do that with Pedro Gonçalves, who remember was their coach at the under-17 level and grew with this generation of players, I think that's the right move. And finally, last but not least, South Africa. They have a friendly tournament coming up in March in Algeria. They're going to be playing against Bolivia and Algeria. Looks like Hugo Bruce is staying on unless another federation can sort of lure him away with a higher salary. And South Africa, I mean, I said this, after they won third place. This is a golden generation of sorts. Percy Tau and Temba Zwane and, Teboho Mokoena and his political choices. And, Mudau and Mudiba and Bronwyn Williams. This really is a golden generation, and they play so well together. So I think, and the thing is, they're all aging too. They're all, 28 or around that age or a little bit older. So they have this 2 competition window between the 2025 Afcon and the 2026 World Cup. Stick with this group. See how far they can get you. They won you the 3rd place match, a 3rd place medal in Cote d'Ivoire. So I think stick with this group and throw in a striker. Let's see how Lyle Foster, he seems to have recovered. He seems to be playing football. Let's see how he can gel and sort of mesh with this group. Maybe Lebo Motiba. Instead of Evidence Makopa, who wasn't horrible, but I think those other 2 are just a step above. So that's my thing. How long did we end up going for here? 35 minutes. Okay, not too long. Wow, right on exactly what I predicted. So I just wanted to. We didn't talk about Namibia. I forgot to research what's going on over there. I think they're sticking with Colin Benjamin, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah. Thanks for listening. I just needed to get back into the habit of, talking to the camera and podcasting. I need to make sure we stay consistent after, the African Cup of Nations. Tomorrow I'm going to be heading to El Ahly versus CR Belouizdad in the African Champions League. So maybe Might do a vlog from there. Otherwise, I'm going to continue doing a weekly breakdown. Probably starting on Monday, we're going to go back to the African football report every single week, recapping the weekend action. And then on Fridays, I think we're going to go back to a general theme, which is, going to be match day 2. For those that aren't familiar, for those of you that found this podcast during the African Cup of Nations, prior to the African Cup of Nations, we were breaking the podcast down into match days. So match day 1 was really about examining African heads of state and their relationship with football. So we talked about Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser. We talked about Mobutu Sese Seko, Ahmed Sekou Toure, and others. So you can find those videos in the channel under match day 1. And match day 2 is going to be a different theme. And I'm going to announce that on next Friday. We're going to start match day 2. So we're going to have a new theme where we're talking about something in African football, probably related to history, politics, and so on and so forth. So thanks for listening. Great to speak to the camera again. Great to speak to all of you again. Please do continue to interact with this podcast. Please do share. Please do subscribe. It does help out a lot. And we'll leave it there for now. Take care. Peace.